Nina never imagined that what should have been a simple family dinner would turn into a heartbreaking confrontation with the truth. As she sat at the table, surrounded by her husband Michael's family, her world began to crack with every glance, every whisper, every forced smile from her mother-in-law, Margaret. Time and again, Nina had brushed aside the unease and swallowed her hurt, telling herself to be strong. But when the sickness after each meal became more than a coincidence, and Margaret's secret favoritism toward another woman grew more blatant, Nina felt a surge of determination wash over her. She remembered her promise to herself on her wedding day, to never let anything come between her and Michael's love. But as the tension in the family reached its breaking point, Nina realized that her silent suffering could no longer go on. What was happening behind the scenes of her marriage? How would Nina's courage lead her to uncover the shocking truth that would change everything? Stay tuned as we unravel the twists in Nina's journey. And before we get into it, let us know where you're watching from today. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Nina stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting her necklace. The delicate gold chain felt cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of anxiety bubbling in her stomach. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. It was just another family dinner, she reminded herself. But deep down, she knew it was never just a dinner at the Caldwell house. "You ready, babe?" Michael's voice called from downstairs. "Coming," Nina replied, giving herself one last glance in the mirror. Her chocolate brown skin glowed, and her curly hair was neatly styled. She looked good, but would it ever be good enough for Margaret? As Nina descended the stairs, Michael's face lit up. "You look beautiful," he said, planting a kiss on her cheek. His warm brown eyes sparkled with genuine adoration, and Nina felt a rush of love for her husband. If only his mother could see her through his eyes. "Thanks, honey," Nina smiled, pushing away the nagging doubts. "Let's go before we're late. You know how your mom gets about punctuality." The drive to the Caldwell mansion was short, but felt eternal to Nina. As they pulled up to the grand house, its pristine white facade looming over them, Nina's stomach churned. She'd been married to Michael for 6 months now, but entering this house still felt like stepping onto a battlefield. Michael, oblivious to her discomfort, practically bounced out of the car. "I can't wait to see what Mom's cooked up tonight. Her pot roast is to die for." Nina forced a smile, following him up the manicured path. Before Michael could even ring the doorbell, the door swung open, revealing Margaret Caldwell in all her perfectly coiffed glory. "Michael, darling," Margaret exclaimed, enveloping her son in a warm hug. Her eyes, a steely blue, briefly flicked to Nina before returning to Michael. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." As they stepped inside, Nina couldn't help but marvel at the opulence of the Caldwell home. Crystal chandeliers, antique furniture, and priceless artwork adorned every room. It was a far cry from the modest apartment she'd grown up in. "Nina, dear," Margaret said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "So lovely to see you again. I do hope you're feeling better. You seemed a bit off at our last dinner." Nina's smile faltered for a moment. "I'm fine, thank you, Margaret. Just a little stomach bug, I suppose." Margaret's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. "Well, we can't have that happening again, can we? I've prepared a special dish just for you tonight." Before Nina could respond, a melodic voice floated in from the living room. "Margaret, do you need any help in the kitchen?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders in perfect waves. She was the picture of grace and elegance, everything Margaret wished her daughter-in-law to be. "Sarah, sweetheart," Margaret beamed. "No need to help, but why don't you keep Michael company while I finish up? Nina can help me in the kitchen." Michael, still blissfully unaware of the undercurrents, grinned. "Great idea, Mom." "Sarah, did I tell you about that new account I landed at work?" As Michael and Sarah disappeared into the living room, Nina found herself alone with Margaret in the vast kitchen. The older woman's demeanor changed instantly, her smile dropping like a mask. "Listen here," Margaret hissed, her voice low. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it won't work. Michael deserves better than some gold digger from the wrong side of town." Nina's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "I love your son, Margaret. I'm not playing any games." Margaret scoffed, turning back to the stove. "Love? Please. What could you possibly offer him that Sarah couldn't?" "Now," Make yourself useful and set the table. As Nina arranged the fine china and silver cutlery, her mind whirled. She'd known from the start that Margaret disapproved of her, but the intensity of her hatred was still shocking. What had she done to deserve such contempt? The sound of laughter drifted in from the living room. Sarah's tinkling giggle mixed with Michael's deep chuckle, and Nina felt a pang of jealousy. She peeked around the corner, watching as Sarah leaned in close to Michael, her hand resting on his arm as she spoke animatedly about something. They look good together, don't they? Margaret's voice startled Nina. The older woman stood behind her, a smug smile playing on her lips. Sarah's been a part of this family for years. She understands our world in a way you never could. Nina bit her tongue, fighting back the urge to lash out. She wouldn't give Margaret the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. "Dinner's ready," Margaret called out cheerfully, her voice changing completely as Michael and Sarah entered the dining room. As they all took their seats, Nina couldn't help but notice how Margaret had arranged the place settings. Sarah sat directly across from Michael, while Nina was relegated to the far end of the table, as far from her husband as possible. "This looks amazing, Mom," Michael said, his eyes roving over the spread of food. "Nina, you gotta try the pot roast. It's Mom's specialty." Nina nodded, forcing a smile as Margaret served her a generous portion. As the conversation flowed around her, Nina tried to focus on her food, but something felt off. The meat tasted strange, different from what the others were eating. As the meal progressed, Nina's stomach began to churn. She felt dizzy, nauseous. Looking up, she caught Margaret watching her with an unreadable expression. "Are you all right, dear?" Margaret asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "You look a bit pale." Michael turned to Nina, worry creasing his brow. "Babe, what's wrong?" Nina opened her mouth to respond, but a wave of nausea hit her. She bolted from the table, barely making it to the bathroom before emptying the contents of her stomach. As she leaned against the cool porcelain, Nina's mind raced. This wasn't the first time she'd felt sick after eating at Margaret's house. In fact, it seemed to happen every time. But surely her mother-in-law wouldn't. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Nina." It was Michael. "Can I come in?" She unlocked the door, and Michael rushed to her side, cradling her face in his hands. "What happened? Are you okay?" Nina looked into his concerned eyes, seeing nothing but love and worry. How could she tell him her suspicions? How could she accuse his beloved mother of such a heinous act? "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a weak smile. "Must be that stomach bug acting up again." Michael helped her to her feet, his arm protectively around her waist. As they made their way back to the dining room, Nina caught sight of Margaret and Sarah huddled together, whispering urgently. When they noticed Nina and Michael, they quickly separated, plastering on fake smiles. "Oh, you poor thing," Sarah cooed, her voice syrupy sweet. "Maybe you should lie down. I can keep Michael company while you rest." Nina felt Michael's arm tighten around her. "Thanks, Sarah, but I think we should head home. Nina needs to be in her own bed." As they said their goodbyes, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was at play. Margaret's parting words echoed in her ears. "Feel better soon, dear. We'll have to do this again sometime." On the drive home, as Michael fretted over her health, Nina made a silent vow. She would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Because one thing was clear. In the Caldwell house, nothing was as it seemed, and Nina was in for the fight of her life. 2 weeks after the disastrous dinner, Nina found herself once again standing in front of Margaret Caldwell's imposing front door. Her stomach churned with anxiety, but not just from the prospect of another uncomfortable evening. This time, she was determined to pay closer attention to what was really going on in this house. Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Ready, babe? Mom's making her famous lasagna tonight." Nina forced a smile. "Can't wait," she lied, her free hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. The door swung open, revealing Margaret in a pristine apron, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. "There you are," she exclaimed, embracing Michael. "And Nina, dear, how lovely to see you feeling better." As they stepped inside, Nina's eyes widened. Sarah was already there, perched on the living room sofa, looking like she belonged. "Sarah? I didn't realize you'd be joining us," Nina said, trying to keep her voice neutral. Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I hope you don't mind. Sarah's practically family, after all. She's been such a help with dinner preparations. Michael grinned, oblivious to the tension. Great to see you, Sarah. The more, the merrier, right? As they settled in the living room, Margaret bustled about, refilling drinks and fussing over everyone. Well, almost everyone. Nina couldn't help but notice how her mother-in-law lavished attention on Sarah while barely acknowledging her presence. Sarah, darling, tell Michael about that charity gala you're organizing, Margaret said, her voice dripping with pride. Isn't it wonderful how involved she is in the community, Michael? Sarah launched into a detailed description of her latest philanthropic endeavor, while Nina sat silently, feeling increasingly out of place. She caught Margaret watching her with a smug expression, as if to say, see, this is the kind of woman my son should be with. When dinner was finally served, Nina's suspicions were immediately aroused. As Margaret placed the plates on the table, she couldn't help but notice that her portion looked slightly different from the others. The sauce seemed a shade darker, the cheese less melted. Dig in, everyone, Margaret announced cheerfully. Nina, I made sure to give you an extra special portion. I know how much you enjoyed it last time. Nina hesitated, her fork hovering over the lasagna. She glanced at Michael, who was already devouring his meal with gusto. Sarah, too, was eating without hesitation. Taking a deep breath, Nina took a small bite. At first, everything seemed fine. The conversation flowed, with Margaret and Sarah dominating most of it. But as the meal progressed, Nina began to feel the now familiar sensation of nausea creeping up on her. Nina, you've barely touched your food, Margaret observed, her voice laced with false concern. Is something wrong with it? Michael looked up, concern etched on his face. Babe, you feeling okay? Nina opened her mouth to respond, but a wave of dizziness washed over her. I'm not feeling well, she managed to say. Excuse me. She stumbled to the bathroom, leaving a chorus of concerned voices behind her. As she splashed cold water on her face, trying to quell the nausea, Nina couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When she returned to the dining room, Sarah had taken her seat next to Michael, leaning in close as she spoke to him in a low, concerned voice. Margaret stood nearby, a look of triumph barely concealed behind her mask of worry. Maybe you should take Nina home, Michael, Sarah suggested, her hand resting on his arm. I can help your mother clean up. The drive home was tense, with Michael casting worried glances at Nina. I don't understand, he said. You seem to get sick every time we eat at Mom's. Maybe you're allergic to something? Nina bit her lip, unsure of how to voice her suspicions without sounding paranoid. Maybe, she said noncommittally. I'm sure it's nothing. But as the weeks passed, a pattern emerged that was impossible to ignore. Every dinner at Margaret's house ended the same way, with Nina feeling ill while everyone else remained fine. She began to dread these family gatherings, but Michael's enthusiasm never waned. Mom's invited us over again this weekend, he announced one evening. She's making her special pot roast. You'll love it. Nina's heart sank. Michael, I don't think I should go. He looked at her, confusion clouding his features. What? Why not? I always get sick when we eat there, she explained gently. Don't you think that's a little strange? Michael's brow furrowed. It's probably just a coincidence. Maybe you're stressed about something? Mom's cooking is great. It can't be that. Nina sighed, realizing she needed to confide in someone who might actually listen. The next day, she met her best friend, Jasmine, for coffee. Girl, something is not right in that house, Jasmine declared after Nina had finished recounting the events of the past few weeks. Have you considered that your mother-in-law might be, doing something to your food? Nina's eyes widened. You mean poisoning me? Jazz, that's crazy. She's Michael's mother. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Is it really that crazy? Think about it. She clearly doesn't like you. She's always pushing the Sarah chick on Michael. And you only get sick when you eat her food. Connect the dots, Nina. Nina shook her head, feeling torn. But if I accuse her of something like that, Michael will never believe me. It could ruin our marriage. Jasmine reached across the table, squeezing Nina's hand. Then you need proof. Next time you're there, pay close attention to everything. And maybe, don't eat the food. Armed with this advice, Nina steeled herself for the next Caldwell family dinner. As they pulled up to the house, she noticed Sarah's car already in the driveway. "Oh, Sarah's here again," Michael said cheerfully. "Mom must have invited her. She's been coming around a lot lately, hasn't she?" Nina bit back a retort, forcing a smile instead. "Yes, she certainly has." Inside, the scene was familiar. Sarah and Margaret were in the kitchen, laughing and chatting like old friends. When they entered, Margaret's eyes lit up, but not for Nina. "Michael, darling," she exclaimed, "come taste the sauce. Sarah added a special ingredient, and I think you'll love it." As Michael moved to the kitchen, Margaret's eyes locked with Nina's, a challenge in her gaze. Nina stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Throughout the evening, Nina watched Margaret like a hawk. She noticed how the older woman always served her last, how her portions always looked slightly different from the others. When Margaret wasn't looking, Nina even switched her plate with Michael's, and sure enough, within minutes of eating, she felt the telltale signs of nausea. But it wasn't just the food. Nina also observed how Margaret constantly undermined her in subtle ways, always when Michael wasn't paying attention. "Nina, dear," Margaret said sweetly as they cleared the table, "I noticed you didn't eat much again. Are you watching your figure? You know, Sarah has the most wonderful diet plan. Perhaps she could share it with you." Before Nina could respond, Margaret turned to Michael. "Oh, Michael, I almost forgot. I have those old photo albums you wanted to see. Sarah, why don't you come along? I'm sure you'd love to see Michael's baby pictures." As the three of them headed to the study, leaving Nina alone in the dining room, she couldn't help but feel a surge of anger and frustration. How long would this go on? How long would Michael remain oblivious to his mother's machinations? The final straw came at the next family dinner, barely a week later. As they all gathered in the dining room, Margaret made a great show of rearranging the seating. "Oh, Sarah, why don't you sit here next to Michael?" she suggested, gesturing to the chair that had always been Nina's. "You two have so much to catch up on, and I'm sure Nina won't mind sitting at the end of the table. Will you, dear?" Nina opened her mouth to protest, but Michael, ever the peacemaker, jumped in. "That's okay, Mom. I'd rather sit next to my wife if you don't mind." For a moment, Margaret's mask slipped, revealing a flash of anger. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a saccharine smile. "Of course, darling. Whatever makes you happy." Throughout the meal, Nina watched as Margaret and Sarah tag-teamed their attempts to monopolize Michael's attention. They regaled him with stories of his childhood, reminisced about family vacations he'd taken with Sarah's family, and discussed mutual acquaintances Nina had never met. "Remember that summer at the lake house, Michael?" Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "We had so much fun water skiing. We should do that again sometime." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "That would be great. Nina, you'd love the lake house. Maybe we could all go this summer." Before Nina could respond, Margaret chimed in. "Oh, what a wonderful idea. Sarah, you must join us. It'll be just like old times." As the conversation continued, Nina felt increasingly isolated. She picked at her food, not daring to eat more than a few bites. But even those few bites were enough to make her stomach churn uncomfortably. Excusing herself to the bathroom, Nina splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm her racing thoughts. As she dried her hands, she overheard Margaret and Sarah talking in hushed tones in the hallway. "It's working perfectly," Margaret was saying. "A few more dinners like this, and Michael will see what a mistake he made marrying that girl." Sarah's voice was hesitant. "I don't know, Margaret. This feels wrong. What if we get caught?" "Don't worry, dear," Margaret reassured her. "Michael is too trusting for his own good. He'll never suspect a thing. Just keep playing your part, and soon enough, you'll be the one wearing his ring." Nina's blood ran cold. She had suspected something was off, but hearing it confirmed was a whole different matter. As she made her way back to the dining room on shaky legs, she knew she had to do something. Well, what? How could she expose Margaret's schemes without alienating Michael? As she sat back down at the table, Michael gave her a concerned look. "You okay, babe? You look pale." Nina forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired." Margaret's eyes narrowed slightly. "Perhaps you should go home and rest, dear. Sarah and I can keep Michael company." Nina paced back and forth in the bedroom, her heart racing as she rehearsed the words she'd been holding back for months. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, his brow furrowed with concern. The weight of unspoken truths hung heavy in the air between them. Babe, what's going on? Michael asked, his voice laced with worry. You've been acting strange ever since we got back from Mom's. Nina took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation she knew they needed to have. Michael, I need to talk to you about something important. She sat down next to him, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. It's about your mother, and how I feel when we're at her house. Michael's expression softened. What do you mean? Is this about you getting sick again? Nina shook her head, fighting back tears. It's more than that. I don't think your mother likes me, Michael. In fact, I'm certain of it. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Michael's eyebrows shot up in surprise. What? Nina, that's crazy. Mom loves you. No, she doesn't, Nina insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. She pretends to when you're around, but when you're not looking, it's different. The way she looks at me, the things she says, it's like I'm not good enough for you or your family. Michael reached out, taking her hand in his. Babe, I'm sure you're just misinterpreting things. Mom can be a bit traditional sometimes, but she'd never intentionally make you feel bad. Nina pulled her hand away, frustration bubbling up inside her. It's not just that, Michael. Haven't you noticed how she's always inviting Sarah to our family events? Sarah, who she once hoped would marry you. Michael's face clouded with confusion. Sarah's just an old family friend. Mom's known her for years. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything to me, Nina exclaimed, her voice cracking. Every time Sarah's there, your mother makes me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. The way she praises Sarah, the way she puts her next to you at dinner. It's like she's trying to replace me with the daughter-in-law she really wanted. Tears began to fall freely now, and Nina made no attempt to stop them. I've tried so hard, Michael. I've smiled and been polite and pretended not to notice the little jabs and the looks. But I can't do it anymore. It's eating me up inside. Michael moved closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Nina, I had no idea you felt this way. But I promise you, Mom would never intentionally hurt you. She's just set in her ways sometimes. And Sarah, she's harmless. You're reading too much into things. Nina felt her heart sink. She'd hoped that opening up would make Michael see the truth. But instead, he was defending his mother. You don't believe me, do you? She asked, her voice small and hurt. It's not that I don't believe you, Michael said gently. I just think maybe you're under a lot of stress, and it's making you see things that aren't really there. Mom can be a bit overwhelming sometimes, but she means well. Nina stood up abruptly, wiping away her tears. You don't understand, Michael. This isn't stress or imagination. Your mother is deliberately trying to make me feel unwelcome, unworthy. And the worst part is, you can't even see it. Michael rose to his feet, reaching out for her. Nina, please. I love you. You're my wife, and nothing's going to change that. Not Sarah, not Mom, not anyone. Maybe if we all spent more time together, you'd see that there's nothing to worry about. His words, meant to comfort, only twisted the knife deeper. Nina felt a wave of despair wash over her. How could she make him understand when he was so blind to his mother's manipulation? I can't do this anymore, Nina said, her voice barely audible. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. Your mother is tearing us apart, and you don't even realize it. Michael's face fell. Nina, you're overreacting. Mom would never try to come between us. She loves me, and she wants me to be happy. And you make me happy. Nina looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the genuine belief in his eyes. He truly couldn't see what was happening right in front of him. In that moment, she realized that words alone would never be enough to make him understand. I need some air, she said, grabbing her jacket. I'm going for a walk. Nina waits. Michael called after her, but she was already out the door. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped outside, matching the chill that had settled in her heart. As she walked aimlessly down the street, her mind raced with thoughts and emotions. How had it come to this? She'd married Michael because she loved him, because she believed they could build a life together. But now, it felt like that life was being slowly poisoned by his mother's subtle machinations. Nina found herself at a small park, sitting on a bench under the dim glow of a streetlight. She pulled out her phone, dialing the one person she knew would understand. Jazz? It's me. I need to talk. Jasmine's voice was warm and concerned. Nina? What's wrong? Did something happen? The dam broke, and Nina poured out everything. The conversation with Michael, his disbelief, her feelings of isolation and despair. Jasmine listened patiently, offering words of support and understanding. Girl, I'm so sorry, Jasmine said when Nina had finished. But you know what? This just proves what we've been saying all along. Your mother-in-law is toxic, and she's not going to stop until she drives you away. Nina sighed heavily. But what can I do, Jazz? Michael doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm imagining things or overreacting. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then you need to make him see it, Jasmine said firmly. You need proof, Nina. Undeniable evidence that Margaret is trying to sabotage your marriage. But how? Nina asked, feeling helpless. She's so careful, so subtle in her attacks. You're smart, Nina, Jasmine encouraged. And you're strong. You'll find a way to expose her true colors. And when you do, Michael won't be able to deny it anymore. As Nina ended the call and began the walk back home, a sense of determination settled over her. Jasmine was right. She couldn't give up, couldn't let Margaret win. She had to fight for her marriage, for her place in this family. Stepping back into the house, she found Michael waiting for her in the living room. His face was etched with worry and a hint of frustration. Nina, we need to talk about this, he began, but she held up a hand to stop him. No, Michael. I've said what I needed to say, she said calmly. I know you don't believe me, and I can't force you to see what you're not ready to see. But I want you to know this. I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. Your mother might want me gone, but I'm here to stay. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Nina continued. I'm going to prove to you that I'm not imagining things. And when I do, I hope you'll be ready to face the truth. With that, she walked past him and into their bedroom, leaving Michael standing in stunned silence. As she lay in bed that night, Michael's steady breathing beside her, Nina's mind whirled with plans and possibilities. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, that exposing Margaret's true nature would be a delicate and potentially explosive task. But as she drifted off to sleep, one thought burned brightly in her mind. She would find a way to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. For her sake, for Michael's sake, and for the sake of their marriage, she would bring Margaret's deception into the light. Little did Nina know that the opportunity to gather the proof she so desperately needed was just around the corner, at the next Caldwell family dinner. As she finally fell into a restless sleep, the pieces of a plan began to form in her subconscious, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. Nina stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her face pale and drawn. The constant nausea and fatigue from Margaret's dinners had taken their toll. She splashed cold water on her face, determination setting in. Tonight was the night she would expose the truth. In the kitchen, she carefully prepared a pasta dish, her hands trembling slightly as she seasoned it. Michael walked in, wrapping his arms around her waist. Smells delicious, babe. What's the occasion? Nina forced a smile. Just felt like contributing to dinner at your mom's tonight. Michael beamed. That's so thoughtful. Mom will love it. As they drove to Margaret's house, Nina clutched the Tupperware container tightly. Her heart raced, knowing the risk she was taking. But she couldn't go on like this anymore. She needed proof, and this was her chance. Margaret greeted them at the door, her smile faltering slightly at the sight of Nina's dish. Oh, you didn't have to bring anything, dear. I've prepared plenty. Nina smiled sweetly. I wanted to contribute. It's the least I could do. As they entered the dining room, Sarah was already there, looking perfectly at home. Nina's jaw clenched at the sight of her, but she maintained her composure. When Margaret emerged with the plates, Nina watched carefully. Sure enough, the plate intended for her looked slightly different. The sauce a shade darker, the portion smaller. Dig in, everyone, Margaret announced cheerfully. Nina, I hope you enjoy this special portion that I prepared for you. Nina smiled, her voice steady. Actually, I thought I'd try some of my own recipe tonight. Michael, why don't you have this one? I know how much you love trying new dishes. Before anyone could object, Nina swapped her plate with Michael's. She caught a flash of panic in Margaret's eyes, quickly masked by a forced smile. Oh, but Nina, Margaret said, her voice strained, I made that dish especially for you. Are you sure you don't want to try it? I'm sure, Nina replied firmly. I'm looking forward to tasting this new recipe that I've made. As they began to eat, Nina watched Margaret closely. The older woman's eyes darted nervously between Nina and Michael, her own food barely touched. Halfway through the meal, Michael suddenly put down his fork, his face pale. I don't feel so good, he mumbled. Nina's heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. What's wrong, honey? She asked, feigning concern while shooting a pointed look at Margaret. Michael clutched his stomach. I feel nauseous, dizzy. Mom, what was in that pasta? Margaret's face drained of color. I don't know what you mean, darling. It's just my usual recipe. Nina had had enough. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. No, it's not. It's the same thing you've been feeding me for months, isn't it, Margaret? The reason I've been getting sick every time we eat here. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Margaret's eyes widened in panic. Nina, dear, I don't know what you're talking about. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Nina challenged, her voice rising. Then why is Michael sick now? After eating the food you prepared for me. Why have you been giving me special portions all this time? Michael looked between his wife and his mother. Confusion and disbelief etched on his face. Mom, what's going on? Margaret's composure cracked. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted what was best for you, Michael. Best for him? Nina scoffed. You've been poisoning me. Your son's wife. In the tense silence that followed, Sarah's voice piped up, small and guilty. We just wanted to show Michael that Nina wasn't right for him. That there were better options. All eyes turned to Sarah, who clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing what she'd just revealed. Michael's face contorted in shock and anger. Better options? Sarah, what are you talking about? Margaret, seeing the situation spiraling out of control, broke down. I'm sorry, Michael. I always thought you and Sarah would end up together. When you married Nina, I couldn't accept it. I thought if I could make her look unstable, make her sick. You drive me away, Nina finished, her voice cold. So Michael would leave me and marry Sarah instead. The truth hung heavy in the air. Michael stood up slowly, his face a mask of betrayal and disgust. Mom, how could you? How could you do this to Nina? To me? Margaret reached out to him, tears streaming down her face. Michael, please. I only wanted what was best for you. Nina, she's not from our world. She doesn't understand our way of life. Our way of life? Michael spat. Is poisoning people part of our way of life, Mom? Is lying and manipulation? Nina watched as the reality of the situation sank in for Michael. His mother, the woman he had always idolized, had been systematically trying to destroy his marriage. The pain and disbelief in his eyes were almost too much for Nina to bear. I can't believe this, Michael muttered, running a hand through his hair. All those times Nina was sick, all those times she tried to tell me something was wrong, and I didn't listen. I defended you. He turned to Nina, his eyes filled with remorse. Nina, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have seen what was happening. Nina felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, Michael understood. Finally, he saw the truth. But the victory felt hollow in the face of such betrayal. Sarah, who had been quiet since her accidental revelation, spoke up. Michael, I never wanted it to go this far. I didn't know about the poisoning. I just thought we were trying to show you that Nina wasn't right for you. Michael's gaze hardened as he looked at Sarah. And you thought you were? That you had the right to interfere in my marriage? I trusted you, Sarah. I thought you were my friend. I am your friend. Sarah protested weakly. I always hoped we'd be more. Nina felt a surge of pity for Sarah, despite everything. She had been manipulated by Margaret too, in a way, but that didn't excuse her actions. Margaret, seeing her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, made one last desperate attempt. Michael, please. Everything I did out of love for you. Can't you see that? But Michael was beyond reasoning. Love? This isn't love, Mom. This is control. This is manipulation. And I won't stand for it anymore. He turned to Nina, his eyes filled with determination. We're leaving. Now. As they gathered their things, the weight of what had transpired settled over the room. Margaret sat at the table, defeated and alone. Sarah hovered uncertainly in the background, tears streaming down her face. Before they left, Nina turned to Margaret one last time. I hope you realize what you've done. You didn't just try to poison me. You poisoned your relationship with your son. I don't know if he'll ever be able to forgive you for this. With that, Nina and Michael walked out of the Caldwell mansion, leaving behind the shattered remains of what was once a picture-perfect family facade. The drive home was silent, both of them processing the events of the evening. Nina's mind raced with a mix of emotions: relief at finally being believed, anger at the betrayal, and sadness for the pain Michael was experiencing. As they pulled into their driveway, Michael turned off the engine, but made no move to get out of the car. He sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. I can't believe it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. All this time, she was... Nina reached out, placing her hand gently on his arm. I'm so sorry, Michael. I know how much you love your mother. I never wanted it to come to this. Michael turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and regret. No, I'm the one who should be sorry. You tried to tell me, and I didn't listen. I chose to believe my mother over my own wife. Can you ever forgive me? Nina felt tears welling up in her eyes. Of course I forgive you, Michael. You didn't know. Your mother. She's always been so important to you. I understand why it was hard for you to see the truth. Michael shook his head. That's no excuse. I should have trusted you, believed in you. Instead, I let my mother come between us. I almost lost you, Nina. He took her hands in his gaze intense. I promise you from this moment on, you come first. Always. No more family dinners, no more manipulation. It's just you and me now. Nina squeezed his hands, feeling a glimmer of hope for their future. We'll get through this together, Michael. It won't be easy, but we're stronger now. We know the truth. As they sat there in the car, the weight of the evening's revelations settling around them, Nina realized that this was a turning point. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be hard conversations, painful realizations, and a lot of healing to do. But for the first time in months, she felt truly connected to her husband, united against the forces that had tried to tear them apart. They got out of the car and walked hand in hand into their home. It felt different now, like a sanctuary from the storm they had just weathered. As they settled on the couch, both emotionally exhausted, Michael pulled Nina close. I love you, he whispered into her hair. More than anything, I'm so sorry it took all of this for me to see how strong and amazing you truly are. Nina nestled into his embrace, feeling safer than she had in months. I love you too, Michael. We're going to be okay. As they sat there in the quiet of their living room, Nina knew that while the battle was won, the war wasn't over. There would be fallout from this revelation, family dynamics to navigate, trust to rebuild. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel the relief and validation she had been craving for so long. The next morning, as the sun streamed through their bedroom window, Nina awoke with a strange mixture of emotions. The events of the previous night came rushing back, and she felt a momentary pang of disbelief. Had it all really happened? Had they finally exposed Margaret's cruel manipulation? She turned to find Michael already awake, watching her with a soft, sad smile. Good morning, he said quietly. How are you feeling? Nina took a moment to assess herself. Relieved, she finally said. But also, I don't know. It's all so overwhelming. Michael nodded, pulling her close. I know. I barely slept last night, just thinking about everything. I can't believe how blind I've been. They lay there in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Nina spoke. What do we do now, Michael? Where do we go from here? Michael sighed heavily. I don't know. I can't imagine ever trusting my mother again. Or Sarah, for that matter. But she's still my mom, you know? Nina nodded, understanding the complexity of his emotions. We don't have to decide everything right now. We can take it one day at a time. As they got up and began their day, the weight of the previous night's revelations hung over them. They moved around each other carefully, almost tenderly, both acutely aware of the shared trauma they had experienced. Later that morning, as they sat at the kitchen table nursing cups of coffee, Michael's phone buzzed. He looked at it, his face darkening. It's Mom, he said, his voice tight. She's left a dozen voicemails and texts. Nina reached across the table, squeezing his hand. You don't have to deal with her right now if you're not ready. Michael nodded, putting the phone face down on the table. I'm not. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to face her again. As the day wore on, they received calls and messages from other family members and friends. Word had spread quickly, and everyone seemed to have an opinion on what had happened. Nina and Michael decided to turn off their phones, creating a bubble of peace in their home as they processed their new reality. That evening, as they sat on the couch, Nina cuddled into Michael's side. Thank you, she said softly. Michael looked down at her, confused. For what? For believing me. For standing up to your mother. I know how hard that must have been for you. Michael's arms tightened around her. I'm just sorry it took me so long. I should have trusted you from the beginning. Nina tilted her head up, meeting his gaze. We can't change the past, Michael, but we can move forward, together, stronger than ever. As they sat there, wrapped in each other's arms, they both knew that while the road ahead would be challenging, they had each other. And for now, that was enough. The truth had come out, the deception exposed. And while the future was uncertain, Nina and Michael faced it united, their love having withstood the ultimate test. They had emerged from the darkness of manipulation and lies into the light of truth and trust. And in that light, they found hope for a brighter tomorrow. The days following the dramatic revelation at Margaret's dinner table passed in a blur for Nina and Michael. They remained in a self-imposed isolation, screening calls and avoiding social media as they tried to process the seismic shift in their lives. The outside world felt distant and unreal compared to the intensity of their shared experience. On the fourth morning, as Nina sipped her coffee at the kitchen table, she noticed Michael staring intently at his phone. His brow was furrowed, his jaw clenched. What is it? She asked, setting down her mug. Michael looked up, his eyes troubled. It's Dad. He wants to meet with us. Says he needs to talk about everything. Nina felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. In all the chaos surrounding Margaret's actions, she had almost forgotten about Michael's father, Robert. He had been conspicuously absent from family gatherings lately, citing work commitments. Now, Nina wondered if there was more to the story. Do you want to meet him? She asked carefully. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Nina had come to recognize as a sign of his inner turmoil. I don't know. Part of me wants answers, but another part, I'm not sure I can handle any more revelations right now. Nina reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. Whatever you decide, I'm here with you. We faced this together, remember? Michael nodded, squeezing her hand gratefully. After a moment of contemplation, he said, I think we should meet him. Maybe you can shed some light on why she did what she did. The next day, they found themselves sitting across from Robert Caldwell in a quiet corner of a local cafe. Robert looked older than Nina remembered, lines of stress etched deeply into his face. His eyes, so like Michael's, were filled with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. Thank you for meeting me, Robert began, his voice low and gravelly. I know this isn't easy for either of you. Michael nodded stiffly, his posture tense. You wanted to talk, Dad. So talk. Robert sighed heavily, his shoulders sagging. I owe you both an apology. I've known for a while that your mother was struggling with your marriage, Michael. I tried to reason with her, to make her see how happy you were with Nina. But Margaret has always been set in her ways. Nina felt a surge of anger. You knew? You knew what she was doing to me, and you did nothing. Robert held up his hands placatingly. I didn't know the extent of it, I swear. I knew Margaret was unhappy, that she was pushing for Michael and Sarah to get together. But I never imagined she would go so far as to poison you. Michael's fist clenched on the table. Why didn't you say something, Dad? Why didn't you warn us? I thought I could handle it, Robert admitted, shame coloring his voice. I've always been able to talk sense into your mother eventually. But this time, I underestimated how deeply her prejudices ran. Nina listened, her mind whirling. Prejudices? What do you mean? Robert looked at her sadly. Margaret comes from a very traditional, very insular world, Nina. When Michael brought you home, someone from outside our social circle, it challenged everything she thought she knew about our family's future. That's no excuse, Michael spat, his voice rising. Nina is my wife. She's kind, intelligent, successful. How could Mom not see that? Your mother saw a threat to her way of life, Robert explained. She convinced herself that Nina would change you, pull you away from the family, from the life she had always envisioned for you. Nina felt tears pricking at her eyes. All this time, all the subtle jabs and not-so-subtle manipulations stemmed from Margaret's fear of change, of the unknown. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped Nina understand the depth of the older woman's desperation. What happens now? Michael asked, his voice thick with emotion. How do we move forward from this? Robert reached out, placing a hand on his son's arm. That's up to you, son. Your mother, she's not well. What she did, it comes from a place of deep-seated fear and insecurity. I've convinced her to seek help, to talk to someone about her issues. Nina's eyes widened in surprise. She agreed to therapy? Robert nodded. It took some convincing, but yes. She knows she's gone too far this time. She's scared, Michael. Scared of losing you forever. Michael sat back in his chair, conflict clear on his face. I don't know if I can ever trust her again, Dad. What she did to Nina, it's unforgivable. I'm not asking you to forgive her right away, Robert said gently. Or ever, if that's your choice. But I am asking you to consider giving her a chance to make amends, once she's gotten the help she needs. Nina watched the play of emotions across Michael's face. She knew how much he loved his mother, despite everything. The idea of cutting her out of his life completely was clearly tearing him apart. We'll think about it, Nina said finally, surprising both Michael and Robert. But we need time, and if we do decide to give Margaret another chance, it will be on our terms. Robert nodded gratefully. That's all I can ask for. Thank you, Nina. I know you, of all people, have every right to turn your back on our family completely. As they left the cafe, Michael was quiet, lost in thought. Nina slipped her hand into his, offering silent support. She knew he had a lot to process, a lot to consider. That night, as they lay in bed, Michael finally spoke. Do you think we should give her another chance? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nina took a moment to consider her answer. I think that's a decision you need to make for yourself, Michael. I won't stand in the way if you want to try to rebuild your relationship with your mother. But I also won't blame you if you decide you can't. Michael turned to face her, his eyes searching hers in the dim light. But what about you? After everything she did to you, how can I even consider letting her back into our lives? Nina sighed, reaching out to cup his cheek. Because she's your mother, and despite everything, I know you love her. And because I believe in second chances. Not unconditional forgiveness, but the opportunity to make things right. Michael leaned into her touch, his eyes closing. You're amazing, you know that? After everything she put you through, you're still willing to consider giving her another chance. Nina smiled softly. I'm not saying it will be easy. And I'm not saying I'm ready to let her back into our lives right away. But I am willing to leave that door open if it's what you want. They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with difficult conversations and painful confrontations. But as Nina drifted off to sleep, she felt a glimmer of hope. They had weathered the storm together and emerged stronger for it. The next few months were a period of healing and reflection for Nina and Michael. They attended couples therapy, working through the trust issues that had developed during Margaret's campaign of manipulation. Slowly but surely, they rebuilt the foundation of their relationship, stronger and more resilient than before. Margaret, true to Robert's word, began intensive therapy. The process was difficult for her, forcing her to confront long-held beliefs and prejudices. There were setbacks and moments of backsliding, but gradually, she began to understand the gravity of her actions and the damage she had caused. It was a crisp autumn day when Nina and Michael received a letter from Margaret. They sat together on their porch swing, Michael's hand trembling slightly as he opened the envelope. Dear Michael and Nina, he read aloud, his voice catching. I know that no words can ever fully express the depth of my remorse for my actions. What I did was unforgivable, born out of fear, prejudice, and a misguided belief that I knew what was best for my son. Nina listened, her heart pounding, as Michael continued to read. Margaret's letter was a raw, honest account of her journey through therapy, of confronting the toxic beliefs that had led her to such extreme actions. I don't expect forgiveness, the letter concluded. I don't have the right to ask for it. But I want you both to know that I am committed to changing, to becoming someone worthy of being in your lives, if you ever decide to give me that chance. With love and deepest regrets, Margaret. As Michael folded the letter, Nina saw tears glistening in his eyes. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him close as he processed the weight of his mother's words. "What do you think?" she asked softly, after giving him a moment to compose himself. Michael took a deep breath. I think she's really trying. But I don't know if it's enough." "Not yet." Nina nodded, understanding. "We don't have to decide anything right now. We can take it one day at a time, remember?" In the weeks that followed, Nina and Michael had many long discussions about Margaret's letter and the possibility of reconciliation. They consulted with their therapist, weighing the potential benefits and risks of allowing Margaret back into their lives. Finally, after much deliberation, they decided to take a small step. They agreed to meet Margaret in a neutral location, with their therapist present as a mediator. The day of the meeting arrived, bringing with it a whirlwind of emotions. As they walked into the therapist's office, Nina felt her heart racing. She gripped Michael's hand tightly, drawing strength from his presence. Margaret was already there, looking smaller and more vulnerable than Nina had ever seen her. Gone was the impeccably coiffed society matron, replaced by a woman who seemed to have aged years in just a few months. "Michael, Nina," Margaret said, her voice wavering. "Thank you for coming." The next hour was intense and emotionally draining. With the therapist's guidance, Margaret laid bare the thoughts and fears that had driven her actions. She spoke of her own upbringing, the pressure she had felt to maintain a certain image and lifestyle. She talked about her terror of losing her son to a world she didn't understand, and how that fear had twisted into something dark and destructive. Nina listened, her emotions swinging between anger, pity, and a grudging understanding. She saw Michael struggling too, tears streaming down his face as he confronted the full reality of his mother's actions and motivations. When Margaret finished speaking, there was a heavy silence in the room. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Mama, I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again. What you did, it wasn't just wrong, it was cruel. You could have seriously hurt Nina." Margaret nodded, accepting his words without argument. "I know, Michael, and I will regret my actions for the rest of my life." Nina took a deep breath, finding her voice. "Margaret, I won't pretend that what you did didn't hurt me deeply. Not just the physical effects of whatever you were putting in my food, but the emotional toll of feeling unwelcome and unwanted in my own family." Margaret flinched at Nina's words, but didn't interrupt. "But," Nina continued, "I can see that you're trying to change. And for Michael's sake, for the sake of our future children who deserve to know their grandmother, I'm willing to try to move forward." Slowly, and with boundaries, Michael squeezed Nina's hand, gratitude shining in his eyes. Margaret looked between them, hope and fear warring on her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I promise, I will do everything in my power to earn your trust and to be the mother and mother-in-law you both deserve." As they left the therapist's office that day, Nina felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, took time and effort to rebuild. But for the first time in months, she felt truly hopeful about the future. Over the next year, Nina and Michael worked on rebuilding their relationship with Margaret. It was a slow process, filled with difficult conversations and moments of doubt. But gradually, tentatively, a new dynamic began to emerge. Margaret threw herself into therapy and self-improvement with the same determination she had once applied to maintaining her social status. She read books on cultural sensitivity, attended diversity workshops, and made genuine efforts to understand and appreciate Nina's background and perspective. There were setbacks along the way. Old habits died hard, and there were times when Margaret's prejudices surfaced, albeit in less malicious ways. But each time, she caught herself, apologized, and redoubled her efforts to do better. Nina, for her part, found herself slowly warming to this new version of Margaret. She saw the older woman's genuine efforts to change, to make amends for the harm she had caused. While she knew she might never fully trust Margaret the way she once had, Nina began to believe that a positive relationship was possible. It was at a small family gathering, Nearly 2 years after the fateful dinner that had exposed Margaret's scheming, that Nina realized how far they had come. She watched as Margaret, laughing and relaxed, taught Michael a family recipe in the kitchen. The sight of them together, without tension or underlying motives, brought tears to Nina's eyes. Robert appeared at her side, following her gaze. "You know," he said quietly, "I don't think I've seen Margaret this happy in years. You've given her a great gift, Nina. The chance to be a part of her son's life, to know her grandchildren someday. Thank you for your forgiveness." Nina smiled, touched by his words. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, "but I think we're all better for it." As if on cue, Margaret looked up, catching Nina's eye. She smiled warmly, gesturing for Nina to join them in the kitchen. "Come on, dear," she called. "You should learn this recipe too. It's been in the family for generations." Nina felt a lump form in her throat as she moved to join them. As she took her place beside Michael, she felt Margaret's hand on her arm, gentle and affirming. In that moment, Nina knew that while the past could never be erased, the future held the promise of something beautiful. Later that night, as Nina and Michael prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on the journey they had been through. "You know," she said, turning to her husband, "I never thought we'd be here. After everything that happened, I never imagined we could have a real family relationship with your mother." Michael pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It's all because of you, Nina. Your strength, your capacity for forgiveness. You've shown us all what true love and family really mean." Nina nestled into his embrace, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. They had weathered a storm that could have torn them apart, and instead emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. As she drifted off to sleep, Nina's last thoughts were of the future stretching out before them. A future filled with love, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds of family, not defined by blood or social status, but by the choices they made and the love they shared. The path had been difficult, marked by betrayal, pain, and hard-won trust. But in the end, the truth had set them free. Free to build a new kind of family, one based on acceptance, growth, and the endless capacity of the human heart to heal and forgive. And as the first light of dawn peeked through their bedroom window, Nina knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for having overcome the poison of prejudice and emerging into the light of true understanding and love. If Nina's journey moved you, let us know in the comments below. Her story is a reminder that even in the face of doubt, deception, and emotional struggle, the courage to stand up for what's right can lead to extraordinary change. It shows us that love and determination can reveal the truth hidden beneath the surface, no matter how painful it may be. Thank you for watching, and if you believe in standing strong for yourself and your loved ones, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like Nina's. We look forward to sharing more moments of courage and resilience with you.